Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around all things dealing with COVID-19. We discuss three crises on the show: the health, financial, and racial inequality crisis. We're always looking for guests and theme suggestions. Please email us, sree@sree.net, SREE@sree.net. Today, we have a very special episode for you. We are going to meet Gail Simmons. She's a judge on Top Chef, the author of Bringing It Home cookbook, and she's helping #Save Restaurants and the jobs of 11 million restaurant workers in the US, along with this movement to make a difference at this very critical moment. My co-host is Jennifer Lazarus. She's at I Am Jenny Lazarus. She's the VP of Business Development and Strategy at Digimentors. We are so grateful to all of you for being here. Please hit share right now. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And you'll meet Gail and Jennifer in just a couple of minutes. Hi, everybody. I'm Sree, and I'm so delighted that you're here with us. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting business. Our motto: don't cancel your event without talking to us. Don't even plan your virtual event without talking to us first. You can see my email address right here, sree@sree.net. Thank you for being with us. We're live on all those platforms, and this is our show. It's a daily global show that airs on social as well as on Scroll.in, one of India's leading news, culture, and information websites, and they have a fabulous food section as well. We're able to do this because of our producers, Rose Horowitz, who's at Rose Horowitz 31, and Vandana Menon. Please follow them and check out our guests. You can see all the archives at Sreenet, youtube.com/Sreenet. And as we said, we have more than 281 guests who have joined us in our first episodes, our first 150 episodes from 16 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. We can't do this without the support of our sponsors. And very quickly, we want to thank Muckrack Academy for allowing us to create and helping us to create fundamentals of social media. Free certification now available, mrac.co/social. More than 4,000 people have taken this course. You'll learn a lot, as I did, putting this course together. mrac.co/social. We're also grateful to our friends at nonbelievable.com, divinely delicious cookies on a mission. Each handcrafted cookie provides a meal to those in need. One cookie equals one meal. Nonbelievable.com, 20% off with the code SREE, SREE. And promotional consideration is also provided by
Hotstar Premiere Nights. Watch the year's biggest blockbusters streaming straight to your screen, exclusively on Hotstar.
A newly married couple's life is jeopardized in the new thriller Khuda Hafiz, streaming straight to your screen this Friday on hotstar.com/US. Use the code SREE2020 to get a $3.75 a month subscription to Hotstar. All the movies are subtitled, of course. Now, are you ready to meet Gail Simmons? To introduce her, I'm going to bring on screen my colleague and dear friend, Jen Lazarus. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Sree. Great to be here. How are you?
Great to have you here. And we meet several times a day on our conference calls and Zoom calls. And I know it's a tiring day for you, a long day for you. So thank you for making the time. And you told me very early that we could maybe try and book your friend, Gail, and I was so excited about it. So tell us about Gail, and let's bring her on.
Gail is my friend of many, many years. I don't want to say how many years, but many, many years. And I'm so thrilled that she's joining us tonight because she is truly a wonderful person and a wonderful proponent for her industry and for so many. And I'm just thrilled that she's here to talk to us tonight about the outsized impact that COVID has had on the restaurant and food industries. Most people know Gail as a judge on Bravo's Top Chef, where she has been for several seasons, and she'll talk a little bit about that, but also about her long experience in the restaurant and food industries. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Gail.
Hello,
Hi.
Gail. How are you?
Hi, everyone. How are you? Thank you for having me, Sree and Jenny. It's always good to see you.
So happy you're here with us tonight.
I'm excited to have you here. And anyone who's a foodie, of course, knows Gail's work and all the great work that you have done on television, in your cookbooks, and elsewhere. Our first question always, Gail, is how are you? How are you doing in this pandemic? How's your family?
We're okay. We are doing mostly well. We're healthy. We are able to get out into the sunshine a little bit this summer. Most of my family, like Jenny's family, lives in Canada. So for us right now, just the inability to see our families, my brother, my husband's family, my parents, that has been, a really hard, complicated matter for us, besides obviously staying healthy and navigating work and school and life under the conditions we're all living in. But otherwise, no complaints. We're taking it day by day. Thank you.
Gail, I am so excited. Lucky me that I get to speak to you often and hear about all the amazing things you're doing. And every day I'm more and more impressed. And most of all, first I want to have people, well, here's Gail's cookbook, which is phenomenal for anybody who hasn't seen it or been able to use the recipes. It's phenomenal, and I highly, highly recommend it for starters. But also, Gail, I'd love for you to have you tell everybody how you got to where you are today and a little bit about your experience and background.
Sure. I don't want to bore you because I've been working in the food and restaurant kind of media industry for over 20 years. But I started back in Canada. I really had no idea about working in the food industry. When I first started out, the food industry beyond restaurants really wasn't what it is today. That was sort of before social media, certainly, really when the internet, when blogs and food websites really becoming a thing. And when I was growing up and when I first realized that food was my passion, media really meant publishing, meant newspaper and magazine publishing. And that's where my passion lay. And when I graduated college, I decided that I really loved food, wanted to work in food writing, wanted to cook, wanted to write, wanted to travel. And I got jobs in publishing in Canada. And I worked as an editorial assistant and in editorial capacities for a magazine and a newspaper in Canada before understanding and getting some advice actually from an editor who basically said that if I really was serious about it, I had to learn how to cook. Best and most painful advice I'd ever heard, because at the time when I was in my early 20s, I was like, well, I love food. Isn't that enough? But you're really not an expert. And he taught me that if I really truly wanted to write about food with authority and authenticity, that I needed to learn the trade. And so I quit my job and I picked up my life and I moved to New York about 21 years ago. And I enrolled in culinary school. I got a professional culinary degree and then thought I could go work in magazine and publishing then. But what I was taught at that point, the kind of second big rude awakening at the time, was that just because I'd gone to culinary school, I certainly wasn't a chef. And if I wanted to truly speak the language of the kitchen and again, understand how to write about it and portray it, I needed to work in kitchens. So instead of going right back to magazines, I started working in kitchens and started right at the bottom I was a prep cook. I worked in the garde manger, which is the cold station, sort of the first stop that a chef, a young cook takes en route to becoming a chef. And I will say quite clearly that I am not a chef. I do not work in restaurants. I do not own a restaurant. The word chef is the word boss in French. And the word chef to me really signifies the person who is leading a kitchen. So I don't ever want to be called chef. I am a professional cook. I certainly have a cooking background, and I spend a lot of my life with my hands, in the food, but I don't ever call myself a chef. So I worked in kitchens for a long time. I learned to cook in really great kitchens in New York City, but always with the idea that I wanted to go back into writing. And when I felt like I had that experience, I left the kitchen and went back to magazines. I worked for the food critic at Vogue magazine for 2 years as his recipe and research assistant. I then went to work for a chef in New York, amazing Frenchman named Daniel Boulou, helped running his marketing, his writing, his special events and projects for 3 years. And from there, I went to Food Wine magazine, which was really the culmination of all my experience at the time. I worked at Food and Wine for 15 years in various capacities, running their part of their marketing department, their event department. I ran the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen, their biggest event, one of the most renowned culinary events in America, for 5 years. And it was right at the beginning of me running the Classic in Aspen that Bravo, the television network, came to Food and Wine to ask them to partner on the concept of Top Chef, a very new idea at the time, a competitive reality show about the real life of working cooks on their way to stardom in kitchens and who could be discovered to be the next top chef. And we loved the idea, although we were sort of petrified of it. And my editor and my publisher at Food and Wine sent me to Bravo to do a screen test and to see if I could be a representative of the magazine on the show. And they asked me to join the show. That was 15 years ago. We started shooting in 2005 in San Francisco, and we've been making it ever since. We just finished our 17th season. We've been nominated for, 13 Emmys, I think, and we won one of them. And I went on to then write books and work on other shows. I started a production company a couple years ago with a business partner to make more focused food content that focuses on women and emerging voices in the food space. There's a lot to unpack in the restaurant industry these days. So trying to make transparent television and digital content that really represents the people who are making food around this country. And that's where I am. I mean, that's the sort of quick of it all.
Incredible, and so much experience in so many different areas that you bring to the table. And so my question for you at this point is, first of all, congratulations on all the Emmys. That's incredible. Nominations.
It takes a village. I mean, quite literally, we are a village of 150 people at this point making our show. And we're very proud of that. I mean, we couldn't do it without every single person who worked really hard on what we're able to do. So we're very, very proud of it, especially this season. It was a really special, meaningful one for all of us.
I mean, 17 seasons, that's incredible. So well received. Everyone loves it. The content is so relevant and it's just phenomenal. And you are phenomenal on it. So, and I'm super proud. So talk to me a little bit about, this whole feeling of this contrast between, shooting just finishing your 17th season and getting ready to shoot another season and what's actually happening in the food and restaurant industry now. There's this huge veil cloud that's sort of hanging over the entire industry. And, I wonder what that feels like from your point of view.
Well, I'll tell you, it feels a lot worse to the chefs and restaurant workers in this country right now. And as much as I'm a champion of them and a cheerleader, I am emotionally so, connected to them and feel for them. And I'm just trying to do my best to support them in any way when, there is so much loss and so much economic grief right now in the restaurant industry. To give you a snapshot of what the restaurant industry is going through since the March national shutdown and since COVID really hit this country. And what I'm saying goes in many ways for countries all over the world, restaurant workers all over the world. But in America, it has its, own individual challenges. So right now in this country, 1 in 4 people are working in the restaurant industry. That's 25% of people who have lost their jobs during this pandemic have worked in the restaurant and hospitality industry. That's about, they estimate, 11 million people, and an additional 5 million people who work in restaurant adjacent industries. So that means the farmers, vintners, cheesemongers, lobstermen. Truly,
so many people.
The supply chain, the truck drivers, the linen and dry cleaners, the florists, everyone who support restaurants in so many ways that keep that supply chain going to keep America fed in the way that we consume. There is something like, $260 billion worth of revenue that comes in through restaurants every year in this country. And you can see on screen right now, saverestaurants.com, which is the Independent Restaurant Coalition's portal to understanding, supporting, and championing the mission to save restaurants. Right now, the biggest push, the biggest push is to pass what is being called the Restaurant Act, which is an individual act that we are trying to get through Congress to support and stimulate purely restaurants. There have been so many different stimulus plans on the table, but none of them have addressed specific needs of restaurants when the restaurant industry has the most people impacted by the economic collapse in America right now. So the Restaurant Act is trying to push through $120 billion in revitalization, as you can see. And we're not expecting to raise that money. That is a lobbyist act in Congress that we really are asking Congress and the White House to step up and act. Now, there's something that I'm kind of rambling here, but there's something that a lot of people don't really think about when they think about restaurants. Most of the industries that are most deeply impacted by the shutdown, industries that rely on social gathering or on large gatherings. So industries like the airline industry, the cruise industry, the concert and entertainment industries, all of them obviously have incredible challenges right now, but they also are operated by massive companies that have unions, that have lobbyists, that have, a single united voice. The restaurant industry does not and has never until now. The Independent Restaurant Coalition is trying to be that voice for the first time in this nation's history, because largely restaurants are small businesses. They are single operator, tiny industry businesses. So they are completely disjointed. There's never been an underlying unifying voice that can champion for them. And so very quickly, the restaurant industry has had to pull together a coalition that can go to our government in the way that the cruise industry and the airline industry have all been able to do. And this is incredibly challenging when you think about the 60 million people involved that are completely disparate from each other and all struggling in this massive way because of the incredible margins of restaurants and the operating costs. When you think about staffing and food costs and, most importantly, rent and leasing. It's really a trifecta of challenges for the restaurant industry right now.
It's so tragic, and thank you for illustrating this so beautifully so that people understand.
It's a lot.
They can go to saverestaurants.com and
Yes.
participate, take action. There's multiple ways in which they can. We're just going to do a quick tour, what we call, Gail, our global tour. People are watching all over the world.
Sure.
And they're saying hi. Jonathan's watching from the East Village. He's been watching for 155 straight episodes. So he says hi. A lot of restaurants in the East Village are dying. And
That's for sure. I mean, they're estimating that, it could be up to 66, 70% of restaurants, independent restaurants, will not make it through this crisis if we don't act and get the stimulus due. So that gives you an idea. And if you think of a place like the East Village, Jonathan, it really is made up of small independent restaurants. That is the culture. That is the heartbeat of New York City.
Daryl says, hello from Richmond Hill in Queens, where you can get the multicultural cuisine of Trinidad and Tobago, the best tasting food on planet Earth.
I don't disagree with you. I am a huge Trinidad and Tobago culinary fan. I eat callaloo and many delicious dishes from Trinidad all the time, almost every week, actually.
Wow, that's amazing that the first cuisine we talked about you're a fan of. So
well, I'm a fan of most cuisines, but Trinidadian food definitely holds a special place in my heart.
Julia is asking him about Sybil's, and Daryl's tagging all his friends, which is awesome. And Aparna is watching in LA, says, I'm a crazy Top Chef super fan self, or my crazy Top Chef super fan self is beyond excited by Gail Simmons on tonight. And yes to hashtag save restaurants.
Thank you.
Beautiful. And Stefan says, huge Top Chef fan here. Hi, Gail. Hi, Jennifer. Greetings from Ramsey, New Jersey. Stefan is on our Digimentors team and is a fabulous social media consultant and has his own show where he hosts photographers to talk about social media. It's called the Spin It Social Hour. And Aparna is saying, hi, my mom is watching in Kerala, India. Hi, Amma, love you.
Awesome.
Gail, have you been to India?
I have never been to India. I have to say I am deeply saddened by that, and I hope to get there one day. It's at the top of my list.
Awesome. Mark says, good evening from Durham, North Carolina, representing here. If you can, talk a minute about the food of the southern part of America.
Oh, I mean, the food, I actually just got back from 4 weeks in South Carolina, where I love spending time. The food of the southern United States is particularly special, unique, and so deeply rooted in the culture of the South. I mean, there's nothing else like it, for sure. And I have to say the representation now more than ever of African-American culture that really is to credit for a lot of the original, what we all have come to know as Southern food, just can't be ignored. There is so much rich history, some of it, dark history, upsetting history, but I think that what is important now is to always think back on, what we all in the restaurant industry, certainly, but I think all of us in this moment in America's history are thinking a lot about is the story behind the foods we love, who should be properly representing them, and who should be getting the credit for their unique creation, and bringing so many of the ingredients that the South is famous for to the rest of us. So I am, the food of the South is complex and fascinating and so regional. You can't blanket, just like you can't blanket any cuisine. You can't just say Italian cuisine. Every region is so uniquely different, and that is very true of the South. If you think of things like barbecue, don't talk to someone in South Carolina about barbecue if you're talking about Texas barbecue. These are two totally different things. These are two totally different cultures and two totally different traditions. And so it's a really special, delicious part of the world. I could explore it all day.
Delicious part of the world. I love hearing that. There's also been a kind of reckoning of sorts, as you said, about who's allowed to present, and especially in Southern food, there was a whole...
that's for sure.
Yeah, there's a whole brouhaha. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but
sure it is, and it should be, and it's long overdue. Truthfully, I think that it's incredibly important right now that we all spend time thinking about things that perhaps we'd never had to think about before, in terms of where our food comes from, where the ingredients that we use every day come from. That's not to say that we can't all cook and enjoy them. But acknowledging and understanding America's very complicated food history is important right now. And if we're going to, all of us, acknowledge that this country has for a long time suppressed a lot of African American history, a lot of Black history, and not really been able to give it the credit that it deserves in so much of what built America, food is a major part of that story.
Thank you. We have lots of comments coming in, and then you're going to continue to get grilled by Jennifer Lazarus.
I'm ready for it.
Oh, look, Jenny, she said bring it on. So I hope you've got the toughest questions.
By the way, Gail and I had a very memorable trip to the South.
We did.
A lot of Southern cuisine. And
Oh my goodness.
it was one of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had.
I mean, 2 girls on a mission for 4 days in Charleston without our children. I mean, it sounds cliche, but we had a really great time.
The best time.
Not all the stories can be shared, right? Not all the stories can be told. But
Not all the stories can be shared. And at one point, we were in we were at a very small gathering with several of the world's best chefs. Am I right?
True. No? That's true. And we ate well. We did not go hungry that weekend.
So well.
She is an amazing date. I brought her to the Charleston Food and Wine Festival 3 years ago. She was my date for the weekend. And let me assure you, she's a great sidekick.
So I'm just going to go through these comments because we'll lose them. There's so many comments coming in. Daryl says, glad to hear you like Trini food. Jonathan says, sadly, several have been closed and more are in danger of closing in Union Square in New York. Deborah Kerr says, representing Asheville, North Carolina, we have the best chefs. So
I will agree. A few of my favorite chefs in the world, women chefs too, amazingly strong women chefs in Asheville. You have a great food city.
Yeah, this is great. Ellen says Louisiana is the best from my New York view. And there's so many comments coming up here. Aparna's pointing to the New York Times Southern Foodways Alliance coverage, the controversy that I brought up, and she's linking to it. This is what we call annotating our discussions, right? So that people who are watching can follow up and continue to learn.
This is an important article and an interesting one. You know, I know the Southern Foodways Alliance very well, followed them for years and been involved with them in many ways. I know John T. Edge, their director, for a very long time. And there's a lot of things we need to question right now that in retrospect seem obvious. This is 2020, as we say, right? Hindsight and everything. But we have to keep questioning, keep pushing, keep examining the way that we do our work and who should be doing that work and who should get credit for the work. And sometimes it's important to put ourselves aside and let other people speak. So read the article and you'll understand.
Daryl says, I believe the best way to make friends is to cook and eat together.
Couldn't agree more.
And Mark is asking an important question. Can you talk about sexism in the restaurant industry?
Sure. I mean, how much time do you have, Mark Lee? I will say, like many other industries, the restaurant industry has been, and specifically the kitchen culture in professional restaurants for many years, long before I was even alive, has been largely male dominated, has been largely a culture. Look, the kitchen culture, the French Western kitchen culture that we know in America, that was based in French cuisine and from a European perspective, designed the professional kitchen to be called a brigade. The brigade system of kitchens is based on the military. So let's just start there. The way that a kitchen hierarchy is set up and the way that the culture is set up, and this is back, since Escoffier, really was based on a militaristic system. And not unlike the military, it is largely male dominated. Kitchen work is largely physical work. It is, and so it was for a long time. It was also, public work versus the private work of the home, which was largely done by women. And I'm going back anthropologically here, right? I'm stating that not as opinion, but as the truth of how we got here. That's not excusing it by any means. As a woman who's worked in kitchens under many circumstances, some great, some awful, I can say that it is changing. It was hundreds of years in the making, and only in the last kind of 30 years, 40 years, let's say, have we started to really acknowledge that women are equals, that women chefs are and can lead kitchens obviously just as strongly, if not more so than men, and that they deserve to be paid and treated equally. But this was not the case. The culture of kitchens for so long did not acknowledge that. And there, over the years, especially in the last decade, even half a decade, has come to light many instances where restaurants, again, because they are often small independent businesses that are not part of big companies or corporations that have HR departments and systems in place for regulation of sexual harassment and assault and healthcare, the simple things that big companies have the access to. Kitchens were run sort of like wild circuses, and not all of them by any means. There are many different kinds of kitchens all over this country. When I worked for Danielle Boulou, I was working in a 4-star New York City kitchen that was the most respectful, precise, clean, and organized kitchen I'd ever known. And Danielle treated everyone with respect. That's not to say that there weren't many more men working in it than women, but we're all getting there. We are starting to work better. We are starting to acknowledge the weaknesses in kitchens, and thankfully, organizations like James Beard Foundation and Women Chefs and Restaurateurs and many media organizations are really starting to make noise about the way that kitchens need to be run and the way women in them need to be treated. And that includes maternity leave, that includes sexual harassment policies. I could go on. So it's a slow and steady race. It will not happen overnight. We are way further along than we were 20 years ago, even when I started working in restaurants. So, we keep pushing forward day by day.
Let's just take a look at some more of the questions, the comments, and then we'll come back. Apollo says, there's Edna Lewis, who was a famous Southern chef, preserved a lot of cuisine. And
that's an understatement. Edna Lewis was one of the founding chefs of America, and she should be acknowledged with the best of the best in this country. She was an incredibly trailblazing woman, an African-American whose grandparents were slaves, if not, I believe her grandparents were slaves. She was born on a plantation, and she rose up to become an incredible leader, mentor, and really the founding chef of Southern cuisine in America.
Thank you. Aparna Thank you. Aparna is asking about Padma Lakshmi, and that what is your take on that? Someone with her reach from Top Chef, she had trouble selling Taste the Nation, which has happily been picked up for another season on Hulu.
Thank goodness. Padma is my co-host and my partner in crime. I'm incredibly proud of that show. It is something she's enormously passionate about, and that we're also proud that she was able to make on her own terms with Hulu. What do I think about the fact that she had trouble selling it? It just doesn't surprise me. I've been trying to sell many shows for years, and I see men in my industry making the same shows, but when I go to pitch them, I'm told that there isn't enough of a hook, and that it can't be an all-female cast. A statistic that before Padma's show, besides Top Chef, there are almost zero. I literally can't think of any other primetime network television show that has a woman as a host. Literally, there aren't.
Wow.
Because we are told by network television that women can't lead a show, and that's food television. There are tons of women in daytime television in the food industry. Certainly, incredible women, but very few women in prime time as the host of food shows in this country, still to this day. So the television industry has a long way to go too, and thank goodness Padma's helping us break that glass ceiling.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Jenny by pointing out that Jason Barak says, "Go Jenny," and welcome Gail with multiple exclamation marks.
I missed your real face in front of mine, for real.
So Jen, tell us who Jason is, and then you take over from here.
That is my husband. And he's sitting in another room and watching us. And he is a huge fan of Gail for a long time, many years.
Ditto.
And I'm hoping that Gail's husband's watching as well, who I've known.
He might be putting our daughter to bed, but then I know he was planning on signing on.
That's so funny. So Gail, that's very interesting, by the way, to hear that. I know that you had been trying to pitch shows for a long time, but I'm disappointed to hear that that's really where you've been, where the stopgap is, that's unfortunate. And
we're getting there. It's changing, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat was with Netflix, and these are all streaming shows. Like until streaming media came into the picture, there was almost nothing. Streaming, because it doesn't have to apply to the same rules as network television in terms of ratings and advertising, and it has a different structure, has been able to do it. Thank goodness, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, they've done some really great work in bringing women to the forefront in food television, but there's still very little in comparison. And it's frustrating, and hopefully it'll change, and hopefully we can all just keep forcing them to see that we have an audience and we have a demand.
And it's interesting because I don't know that that's something people would know, that would be so obvious to people, right?
Because I don't think it is. I think you're right that most people, like anything, when you become, what's the word, sort of used to seeing things on TV, you stop thinking about the fact that, and this goes for people of color as much as women, in the very same way, that you just get used to seeing, let's say, all white people on television shows, or only men as hosts of major network television shows. You're desensitized. And so it's not something that people necessarily think about day to day when they're flipping through the channels. But when you stop to do the research and kind of do the statistics, it's the same for minorities of all kinds. And I'm not saying that as a woman, it's the same as being a person of color. Obviously, everyone has their own challenges, but these struggles are very apparent when you look at them in terms of the numbers.
So talk to me a little bit more about the current state of the restaurant industry. At the moment, do you see any restaurants doing anything really creative to try to, relieve some of the, the impact of the economy and the economic crisis on their establishments?
Absolutely. What I have seen over the last 6 months in an industry that has literally been in collapse, and it has just been a completely cataclysmic shift in the economics of a 15 million person industry, billions of dollars in revenue. What I have seen, because restaurants are resilient and creative and scrappy, to say the least, because they are small, independent, entrepreneurial businesses, the way that they have pivoted. So many restaurants I know obviously are doing creative delivery and takeout, but more than that, just some examples of things that I've loved from restaurants are small restaurants that, let's say, have big wine lists, or our wine bars are becoming provisionary sort of general stores. So you can go to the storefront and they are not only selling their wines at wholesale prices or just above wholesale, so you're getting real deals on exceptional sellers of wine. That's where I've been getting all of my wine during quarantine, and Lord knows I've needed it. Is small local restaurants that are selling off their wine cellars for incredible prices, and these are wines you're not going to get in the liquor store.
That's amazing. I've heard that, by the way.
Pardon me?
I've heard that, by the way, and I'm glad to hear you say it. I wasn't sure it was true, but I've been hearing rumors about that.
The deals are amazing, because, and in a restaurant, when you go and have a bottle of wine, you're usually paying 200 to 400% markup, because that's where restaurants make actual money, because the margins on your plate of grilled fish are like, barely there. There's the margins on food are so small that the way restaurants can actually make money and pay their rent is through liquor markup. When you're paying 200% markup on a bottle of wine, or 300%, that's one thing when you're sitting in the restaurant. But now that restaurants are pivoting, a lot of them are able to sell their wines at a fraction of that price, just above what they paid for it. And you're getting incredible deals. So I love that. So when you're looking to buy wine, yes, go to your local wine store, support your local shops, but check out any local wine bars in your neighborhood and see if they're selling bottles for takeout, as a provisioner. And they can often give you great deals on great bottles. And they're also selling other things. They're doing meal kits. They're doing meal and gift baskets where you can get the olive oil from their purveyors. As I said before, there's 11 million people employed and another 5 million in adjacent industries. So what happens with the purveyors, the people, the crops, the farmers who were growing for restaurants, growing millions of pounds of broccoli and tomatoes for this, or peaches for this season that now restaurants aren't able to purchase because no one's eating in their restaurants. What's happening with those crops? Well, a lot of restaurants are working in partnership with their purveyors and farmers to do meal kit or CSA farm boxes through their restaurants that you can buy and bring home. And those boxes are incredible. I've seen restaurants like Missy in Brooklyn, Missy and Lilia, Missy Robbins restaurants, or Blue Hill at Stone Barns, putting together incredible boxes, kits full of all of the chef's favorite ingredients from their favorite farmers that you can't buy in grocery stores that are at the same cost that you could buy in the grocery stores. So handmade breads and artisanal pastas, incredible vegetables, fruits, meats and cheeses, and the access through restaurants to, directly to the farmers is a pretty great way to do things too.
That's amazing. Has there been any governmental help thus far for the restaurant and food industry?
Yes, but it hasn't been much different than any other industry. So if you all remember, at the start, back in April, I guess it was, the timeline is a bit blurry right now. Is it Wednesday? I don't know.
Me neither.
But, at the beginning, there was the PPL, the small business loans that were being granted. And they were great for restaurants in some ways, sure. They gave them a quick influx of cash that allowed them to hire back and get up and running in a small way. The issue was, if you remember, they were for an 8-week period. The money had to be used within 8 weeks,
right.
Mostly for payroll. And while that's fine, payroll is only a small percent of what restaurants have to pay. What about food costs? What about rent?
Right.
Which are really what make up such massive pieces of the restaurant puzzle. And then 8 weeks doesn't do anything if your restaurant still has to be closed, because restaurants aren't allowed to open. 8 weeks into this crisis, restaurants were in a major shutdown. So what's the point in hiring back staff and buying food to cook when you're only allowed to do takeout and delivery, and if that, and it doesn't actually pay to get up and running? So that was a really short-term solution. It was, as Save Restaurants, as the Independent Restaurant Coalition will tell you, it was an 8-week solution to an 18-month problem.
Wow.
So yes, there have been loans, there have been some grants, small business grants and loans, but by far nothing that will come close to really stimulate a real stimulus package that will get the restaurant industry back on its feet.
Can you talk to us a little bit, or what are some of the highlights of the Restaurants Act?
Highlights of what? Sorry?
The Restaurants Act, like what is it that the restaurant is asking for?
Well, right here, you can look at it, but it's $120 billion revitalization fund that can be distributed really quite swiftly to restaurants. I mean, it's a very easy channel at this point through the Independent Restaurant Coalition to get money into restaurants that will allow them to make rent through the end of the year, into next year, into 2021. That will allow them to get their employees back and allow them to pay off the debt that they are in. Now, forget about moving forward. That's almost the easy part once they have money to do so. The issue of restaurants, again, because they are small businesses that operate with such small margins, the issue becomes that this week's revenue pays last week's bills. So if there's no revenue this week, no one from last week is getting paid, and the next week, and the next week, and the next week. So now something like 70% of restaurants are in debt over $50,000 or more, some way upwards of that. And so
Such a crisis.
They need to pay their purveyors, their farmers, their rent, their bills, their electricity, their gas, before, just to pay for what was backlogged. And this stimulus package will allow them to do that so that they can then hire back their staff and start up again. So that's really what this fund is pushing Congress to do. And the way to help, if you're listening today, and if you go on saverestaurants.com, is you will see this tab to tell Congress to pass the Restaurant Act. As citizens and residents of America, we all have the right to use our voices again, to urge our government to act in favor of citizens. And so filling out this information, and it's a very easy one click to take action and to tell your local representative that you need to support the Restaurant Act.
Daryl says, Gail, can you talk about the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers?
I can't talk about it with tremendous authority, again, because I'm not a restaurateur or restaurant owner. But I can tell you that, the tipping versus minimum wage argument is something that people have been fighting for, state to state, for a very long time. And it differs in every restaurant, the way that they divide up their tip structure. In New York State, we've been, the minimum wage was just raised, and that we hope will make a difference, but it is still by far not a minimum wage that is a living wage for many reasons. But there's, the tip division is very complicated, especially in restaurants, because tips go to the front of house most of the time and not the back of house. And so there is a very unequal structure to the way that restaurants divide gratuities. So a lot of restaurants are trying to address that, but it also means raising the cost of your dinner plate. And that's what gets complicated, because diners don't understand why their steak was $30 and now it's $40, when really the cost of food and then paying the rent and making sure that their employees make a minimum living wage is all part of that grilled steak and potatoes.
Right. And most people don't realize, or may not realize, that the margins in restaurants are very, very slim. Yeah. Not in the alcohols.
And the food cost. Yes. But, the food, cost of food in this country is exorbitant. That's also a political issue. It's not that there isn't enough food in this country to go around, and I'm not going to get into hunger and food apartheid at this very juncture, because that's an enormous umbrella. We can come back another night and talk about that. But just in terms of the cost of food for restaurants, big farm and the farm acts, really the major agriculture that's supported in this country are agriculture like corn and wheat and rice, but the cost of fruits and vegetables, the cost of proteins is still enormously expensive in terms of paying the supply chain. So when it gets from the farmer to the distributor to the restaurant and then to the consumer, and that's the very shortened version of this supply chain, the cost becomes very high in order to meet all of those marks and pay the different people down that chain that need to be paid in order for you to get your dinner. And so that is an increasing issue in this country. And really, there needs to be subsidies that make small farming.
I'm sorry to interrupt this wonderful conversation.
Okay. I'm rambling a little bit. I'm passionate.
I was just getting to Stefan's question.
Just before we do that, Jen, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you're coming to the show right now, we're talking to Gail Simmons, the well-known cookbook author and judge on Top Chef, and she's being interviewed by Jen Lazarus, my colleague and good friend of Gail's, and we're learning about so many industries, so many aspects of the food business, and she's working on the hashtag Save Restaurants campaign. Anyone who's watching right now, please go to saverestaurants.com and take action. There are places where you can take action. And please tag your friends. Anyone who's a food lover should watch this show. It'll be back on this platform as soon as we go off the air. They can watch if you tag them now, if you share it now. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So let's go back to the question that Stefan had, and maybe we'll take another 5-7 minutes, and then we'll let Gail get back to her evening.
So Gail, Stefan is asking, your most memorable meal ever and where?
Stefan, that's like choosing favorite child. I couldn't possibly, although I don't have thousands and thousands of children, I have 2 and I will never have more. But I have had thousands and thousands of meals, and I've been very lucky, beyond lucky, to have eaten some extraordinary meals all over the world for my job. I mean, somehow I got to pass this all off as work. It's beyond amazing. And I know it's a cop-out, but how do you choose? Some of the best meals I've had have been the simplest, in the most unassuming places. But I also have no memory and could never remember for you exactly what I ate at any given time. I will say that my passion for food stems from a passion for travel and discovering different cultures in the world. And that's what I miss most. That's what this crisis and this pandemic has brought into focus. One of so many things is how much I took for granted the ability to get on a bus or a train or a plane or get in my car and see the world. And every meal I have informs me and teaches me something, and I miss eating out.
I think I miss eating out so much too. I miss eating out with you because you always take me to the best restaurants. I might be able to tell you what some of my favorite meals with you were, because we've had
some meals together, Jenny, that's for sure.
Yeah, we've had some great meals together. So I'm lucky me. Since I don't do a whole lot of cooking, but I love to eat.
The cooking, I mean, that's a blessing. You married a great cook.
I did. Gail, what do you see ahead for the restaurant industry? Short term, long term? What do you think will be in a year?
It's murky, Jenny. I won't lie. A year from now, I don't even know if we will see enormous change unless the Restaurant Act gets passed.
Yeah.
Right now, we will continue to see restaurants do the best they can to get the word out, to be creative and entrepreneurial in the way that they serve their communities. The best thing about restaurants is that restaurant people are the most generous people in the world. They feed people. That's what they do from the bottom of their hearts. Yes, it's a business, but they are willing to make very little money at it in order to feed their communities. What is an amazing thing, and this is kind of looking back, but to look forward to answer your question, one of the most amazing things that come out of this pandemic is watching World Central Kitchen, an organization started by Jose Andres, an extraordinary chef.
Oh, yeah. I know.
And Nobel Peace Prize nominee, good friend of mine, who, started World Central Kitchen a few years ago as a way to feed people in crisis. It started by feeding people after Katrina. It has made now millions of meals all over the country, and it was able to get funding to get restaurants in this crisis to turn them into places to feed people. We're out of work restaurant workers, children and families in need who are in places where they don't have access to food and who are, in need of meals. And so watching the restaurant industry pivot in that way has been extraordinary. Watching my colleagues who ran restaurants that were in town now only for people who could afford $100 meals or more, strip down all of that, throw it out the window, and start making meals for everyone, no matter who you are, no matter what you do. If you are hungry, you will get fed. And watching, the restaurant community come together to not only, they got funding to employ their staff, to put their staff back to work, to get their kitchens back up and running, and then to be feeding people through World Central Kitchen, I think was, a really great thing to come out of it. I think there'll be more of that. the creativity of this industry and the resilience of this industry will force us to keep pushing forward, because we're not giving up on restaurants. I think it'll take a long time, unfortunately, for the general population to feel comfortable going inside a full capacity restaurant again. Until really there is, yes, Eric, I see Aparna's message there about World Education. That's exciting. But, I think that until there's a real vaccine, and not just until the vaccine exists, but until the world has access to it, which we don't know how long that will be, there won't be a real comfort and emotional and psychological comfort to eating in restaurants the way that we did just a few months ago. But that doesn't mean that we won't need restaurants. Outdoor dining as long as we can, takeout, meal kits, delivery, supporting restaurants in every way you can, especially in communities that need it the most. I think, think about not just ordering from your own local place, but exploring a new neighborhood and their local places, perhaps a Black-owned restaurant, perhaps, a regional restaurant, an Asian-owned restaurant, a minority-owned restaurant, a woman-owned restaurant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe in the resilience of the restaurant and food industry, and I hope to be back sitting in a restaurant not too long from now, hopefully across from you, enjoying another amazing meal together.
As my mother would say, from your lips to God's ears.
We have a couple of quick comments. Apollo, watching from Vegas, big restaurant city, says, when I was at a bar back in a restaurant, I was paid very little after everyone else.
Barback,
Barback. Sorry, what is a barback? I didn't even know that term.
A barback is a person who's assisting the bartender. So they're working behind the bar, doing all the prep work, the taking of the glasses, cleaning of the glasses, prepping of the bar, the drinks. I feel you, and I understand. I also worked as a barback actually for a summer. It's some of the hardest work that I'd ever done. And I understand that you felt exploited, and there's a good chance you probably were. It's very sad to say.
Apollo says, Sunday morning brunch and kids who were not taught how to behave in a restaurant were hard work.
Oh, yeah.
Brunch is always hard work if you're a restaurant worker. Brunch is hard.
Really? Why?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's early. It's family.
Yeah.
It's children. It's everyone has needs. Everyone comes in cranky. Everyone wants their food very quickly because it's the first meal of the day.
Yes.
And if you want, as a consumer, as a diner, to eat at 10 a.m., the chefs and cooks and servers have to be there at 7, right? Or at 6. And on a Sunday or a Saturday, that means a very early morning.
Yeah.
So brunch is hard work. Always tip well at brunch. If you ever go back to a restaurant for brunch, is my advice. Tip well anyway.
Yes, always tip well.
Let's all tip well. You will not miss that extra $5, and someone else can use it more. If that's the case, if you can afford it.
One thing we wanted, somebody just commented, Macron comment about Chef Vikas Khanna, who is a well-known chef. He was a chef at Junoon in downtown New York.
Yeah.
And in this pandemic, he has helped put together a food drive for 25 million meals in India during the pandemic.
I've seen this. It's extraordinary.
And so on Saturday, on India's Independence Day, he's going to be on our show at noon Eastern. So we'd love everybody to join us. He's been terrific. And Apollo says, thanks for the affirmation, Gail. I thought I was crazy, says Apollo.
Yeah. You're not alone. You're not alone.
And Gail, Daryl says, I volunteer and lobby with onefairwage.com, a campaign to eliminate the $2.13 per hour sub-minimum wage for tipped workers. I would ask Save the Restaurants community to support us. Tom Colicchio does.
Yes. I know he does. Can't speak for saverestaurants.com, but I can certainly speak for a lot of restaurateurs who I also know support it. And I think that it's a complicated question. Like again, I'm not a restaurateur, so it's not something that I wished I could change specifically, directly. But I do understand the plight, and I know how difficult it is for restaurant workers, for sure, tipped restaurant workers. Just
to understand, there's been a movement to eliminate tips altogether and higher pricing. How has that worked out generally?
It's been mixed.
I mean, pre-COVID, right? It's all pre-COVID.
Right,
that we don't know.
pre-COVID. It's been mixed. It's worked well in some restaurants and some restaurant groups who are able to have a large enough pool and a large enough support from the administration of that restaurant group to do it. It's very hard to do in small, single owned and operated restaurants. Some people, there's been combinations that have worked well. Some restaurants have been able to put a certain fee on every check that will then go to help that cause. Sometimes eliminating tip again means raising the cost of food in almost every case. So it comes with a very complicated set of challenges for every different restaurant. And this is part of the conversation that makes the restaurant industry so unique. Every restaurant is different. It is not a one-size-fits-all industry. The way that, other industries operate, where they are working on sort of a level playing field. Every restaurant is different. It has different capacities. It has different communities. It has different sizes and operational budgets. So it's not an easy answer, unfortunately.
I hear you. So before we go, we'll give you a chance to give us a couple of final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I mean, I wish I could say this was an easy way forward. I think that the last 6 months of everyone's lives have been more challenging, I hope, than we'll ever have to see again. But it's not over yet, and because we're sick of it doesn't mean we can ignore it. There's a lot of suffering right now in every industry and in every corner of this country. The country is incredibly divided, and there's a lot of politicking in this country, I think, in matters that are not about politics, that are about human rights, that are about civil rights, and that are about the health of this nation. And that health starts with local communities, and local communities are almost always anchored in their restaurants. So I just think that anything anyone can do to think about ways to help their communities, support local businesses in their communities, you're gonna help the cause. Because this country will look very different when we come out of this if there are no restaurants and if there's that many people still out of work.
And you said the estimates are 60-70% could be in trouble, and that's very
Correct.
Scary. The independent restaurants.
Yeah, exactly.
Before you go, just a couple of other comments. Aparna says, I wish I'd give a lot to transport myself to the modern right now. My first experience with no tipping. She also said that she wanted to send me copies of Kitchen Confidential and Sweet Bitter, these two very famous books. I have read Kitchen Confidential. My 17-year-old son, who's a Gail fan and who got to say hello backstage, has read that. And I think we miss the voice of Anthony Bourdain, and who, by the way, loved Trinidad. His CNN episode about Trinidad was fantastic.
Beautiful.
Right, Gail? And
Montreal. And Montreal. Oh, yeah. He spent a lot of time in Montreal. Although I will say, the Kitchen Confidential and Sweet Bitter, they are one perspective on very specific restaurants and the way they were run. And what's interesting is to read Kitchen Confidential now. I think even Tony would agree that the industry now is very different than when he wrote that book and when he wrote the original article that appeared in the New Yorker 20 years ago or so. The restaurant industry's come a long way, and his restaurant that he writes about and the restaurants he worked in were not representative of every restaurant, for sure. So it, as much as, yes, it certainly is eye-opening about the restaurant industry, it does not paint, I don't want people to think that it's totally generalizing about how all restaurants work and how everyone's treated in restaurants and how everyone acts in restaurants, because I've worked in other restaurants that did not act that way. But it's an amazing read, and he was a brilliant writer.
And some of the changes were spurred by articles and books like that. And also society change and time change as well. Makrand has done a whole thread about Ismail Merchant, the famous director who made all those Merchant Ivory Book movies, and he was an amazing cook and chef, and he owned a couple of restaurants, and I once got to eat his cooking, and he discovered and influenced some of the food interests in Paul Newman. Paul was, bicycle. Was a messenger at the time, and they became friends. And so food is in kind of our lives in so many ways that people don't even realize. Ways. Yeah. Gail, you've been awesome tonight. I'm going to let you go.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It was a real pleasure.
Gail, so much fun to have you here, and so informative. Always so informative.
I hope so. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience and to connect with you about a cause really important to me.
Thank you. And we wish everyone will take a look at #Save Restaurants and saverestaurants.com. And we wish Gail the very best in her work. And we're hoping in a few months she'll come back and talk about her exciting projects some more. Thanks very much, Gail.
Thank you. I appreciate that, guys.
Bye, Gail.
Wow, she was awesome, Jen. You're friends with fabulous people.
Lucky me. Lucky me. They are. Gail is wonderful, and as you now can see, highly informed about all aspects of the food and restaurant.
So genuine, and just like what we, what you see on camera is what you see here, and I think that's important 100%. For people to learn. Talk to me a little bit about this format. What's it like to interview one of your dearest friends? Did you learn anything new yourself, or was it like what are your synapses doing, and you're doing this kind of interview?
It never ceases to amaze me how much Gail, has to share that's of value. So much information. In every conversation we have, we're always talking about, whether we're talking about our kids or we're talking about, our history. I'm born and raised in Montreal. She's born and raised in Toronto. But we attended McGill University together. We talk about the old times, how I've known her husband, whatever it is that we're talking about. Everything is so relatable. Gail is so authentic, and she brings that same sense of authenticity and just deep knowledge into every aspect of her life. I have been, her friend for so long that I have seen her through this entire journey, and she has just grown and remained exactly as, humble throughout. And exactly what you see is what you get. She is who she is, true and true. And that is just an extraordinary person who has accomplished great things and is always learning and always, always giving of her time for her passions. So I'm a super proud friend is all I'll say after that.
Well, that works, and that's a special thing to have, that friendship. Yes. And also, the other thing that struck me is that she has obviously been so successful, but she's clearly thinking about the people who are still on that journey and reaching out to people who need help, and not just in the Save the Restaurants, but the way she was talking about the importance of people of color and giving people a chance. And I know she is doing that. So we're very grateful to her. And thank you for, as always, being here with us. And for folks who haven't met Jen before, she is a fabulous digital person who's a digital executive. She was a chief digital officer like I was before. And we've come together in this new project that we're building together called Digimentors with many of our other friends. And it's been just so much fun to have this extra dimension where you and I get to do this show together. Last week, you hosted an amazing conversation, very scary, sobering conversation about extremism with your friend Oren Siegel. We could just do like once a week, Jenny's friends. And
I love it. I have overachieving friends, all really highly successful overachieving friends. But I will say that I've really enjoyed having this, opportunity to work with you in this capacity as well, because I will say that many, many years ago, as a professor at Columbia Journalism School, and somebody who I've said many times inspired my career and my love of this type of media, digital media, I will say that you always said, stuck with me, always be learning, always be growing. And I think that, that's what we're doing here and we're doing together. And it's been an incredible ride so far, just in the short time. And I look forward to much more.
Thank you so much. Now, one of the things we do before we end the show and before we thank our sponsors once again is we say their names. I interviewed Kimberly Crenshaw, the amazing Columbia Law School professor who coined the term intersectionality. And I asked her, how can we be allies of the African-American community? And she said, say their name. So we're going to do that. We're going to read some more of the comments and questions that came in, and then we'll say goodnight. And we're going to use this cover of Titus Kaffer's cover in Time magazine a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Stunning cover of a mother and a child stolen away. Even the blue glove you notice on there, and it's just a timely cover. And then this photograph that most people hadn't seen until it was published in Time magazine, and I can tell you many people haven't even seen it in Time. And what you see there is a photo of a young Larcinia Floyd with a young George Floyd. She would die 2 years almost to the day that he was killed in Minneapolis, and now they're buried together in Houston. And now let's read their names, and I'll ask you to join me. I'll read a few, and then you'll read a few, and we'll go from there. And I'll ask everyone to think about this. Yes, some of these names are almost household names, but so many of them are not. And these are not all the names. So the fact that we know some tells you that there's so much more work to be done for all of us to understand. The names are Trayvon Martin, Yvette Smith, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, Tanisha Anderson.
Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Jerame Reed, Natasha McKenna, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, William Chapman.
Sandra Bland, Darius Stewart, Samuel DuBose, Janet Wilson, Kaylin Rockmore.
Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Joseph Mann, Terrence Crutcher, Chad Robertson. Jordan
Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Stefan Clark.
Danny Ray Thomas, Antoine Rose, Botham Jean, Atatiana Jefferson.
Michael Dean, Ahmaud Arbery.
Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd.
And those are just a handful of the names. And we say them every night here because we must. And we are doing all we can to cover all aspects of this crisis. And we're always looking for your suggestions and your ideas for covering this crisis. We have lots of stories to do. And we also started covering politics in a more direct manner. We were able to do that last Friday night. We spent learning about polls and understanding them with this episode with Charles Franklin, which I learned so much on, and everybody should see that. And you can find this all in our archives, youtube.com/SreeNet. And then last night, we had a huge discussion around Kamala Harris's selection. We had Marielle Garza, the editorial writer at the LA Times, who wrote the editorial about Kamala Harris's pick. And we had Deepa Sharma from the South Asians for Biden organization. And it was a moving, important night. And we learned so much. And we have a lot of other shows coming up as we announce that we will be here through the elections. And I want to tell you about tomorrow night's show. We have Parag Khanna with us. We're just calling it Parag Khanna Explains the World. He has been named by Esquire as one of the 75 most influential people for the 21st century. He's a global strategy advisor and a best-selling author. And tomorrow's show is at a special 10 p.m. New York City time because he's in Singapore, and it'll be 10 a.m. in Singapore. So please join us if you can. About 23 hours from now, episode number 156, Parag Khanna will be here. He is amazing. You will learn so much, as I do every time I'm with Parag. And so with that, we're going to just thank our sponsors very quickly. We want to thank the folks at Muckrack Academy for helping us create fundamentals of social media. Free certification now available. mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. We also want to tell you about our special nonprofits, How to Cope When the World is on Fire, a digital workshop that I'll be hosting with Beatrice Frey of the UN Peacekeeping Organization, Tik Milan of GLAD, and Dante Licona of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent. You will learn a lot no matter what size organization you have. I'll once again just give you the URL. Take a screenshot or take a photo. There's the bit.ly link, bit.ly/NP Workshop 2020. And we also want to thank our friends at Nunbelievable, divinely delicious cookies on a mission. Each handcrafted cookie provides a meal to those in need. One cookie equals one meal. And we want to thank our friends at She's on Call, Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern. This is a show that you don't want to miss. Two surgeons talking about what's happening in the medical world, including COVID. And tomorrow at noon Eastern, they're going to answer questions about all things to do with school opening. So please follow right now She's on Call on Facebook so that you can watch this tomorrow at noon Eastern time. But their regular slot is Sundays at 11. They got so many questions, they decided to do one extra show. And additional promotional consideration is brought to you by
Hotstar Premiere Nights. Watch the year's biggest blockbuster streaming straight to your screen, exclusively on Hotstar.
A newly married couple's life is jeopardized in the new thriller Khuda Hafez, streaming straight to your screen this Friday, hotstar.com/US, and yes, it is subtitled. Please use the code Sree2020 to get a $3.75 a month subscription. You don't want to miss hotstar.com/US. And a reminder about tomorrow's show, Parag Khanna, 10 p.m. Eastern. He explains the world, one of Esquire's 75 most influential people for the 21st century. And that's our show. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to Jen. She was awesome tonight. And I'm just so grateful that she was here, and to everybody who's watched. And big thank you to our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31, and to Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. And lots of people are commenting. Aparna says, such a solid, timely conversation yesterday on the Harris announcement.
Yeah.
And Aparna says, Lisa Lazarus always get teared up when she hears that. Lisa says, I love that you do this. Thank you so much. Apollo is quoting you, always be learning, always be growing. And Aparna is quoting me, and always be charging your...
Oh, yes, I forgot always be charging. That was the last one.
And Mark says, you're a great interviewer, Jennifer, just as good as Sree. Shh, don't tell him.
Oh,
hey.
God, I don't think so. But thank you, Mark. I mean, I aspire to be Sree.
I can tell you that nothing a professor likes more than a student outshining them. Aparna says, woot for Canada. And Apollo gives a thank you to Gail. There's just lots of going on here. And Apollo says yesterday was an amazing show.
Yes,
and see you tomorrow. And so we've just got so much going on. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll say goodnight. We do have a quick way for you to follow our work, which is to follow us on youtube.com/SreeNet or Twitter @Sree. And by the way, follow Jenny. She's I am Jenny Lazarus on Twitter @I am Jenny Lazarus. But we also have this unusual thing, which is our QR code that you can see. So what you do is just take your Jen, you can go on the side here. We can both peek over the other way. And I'll just tell everybody, you just hold up your phone and you'll get an alert on WhatsApp when we're live. This is not a WhatsApp group. It's just a simple low pressure alert to tell you we are live so you don't miss a single show. We also make announcements on here and all of that. And by the way, there were so many questions we didn't get to, including somebody named Jason Brook who asked Gail, how's the restaurant supporting food banks during COVID? There was just so much going on. Even being the husband of the host didn't get him in front of the line, which tells you we're fair on this show.
He's an avid chef. Avid.
Yeah. So that's great. And Apollo is sending love, and he's moving from, or at least leaving Vegas and coming back to the East Coast. So we look forward to seeing you. Okay. And thanks very much, everybody. I'm just hitting the end button. Bye.
Bye.